Hello everybody, today I have something very nice for you, ranking all of the tribes in the Battle of Polytopia according to their strength in multiplayer. I'm going to be using tiny maps in single player to be able to show you each tribe briefly, and then I'll be showing you my opinions on each of them, and then finally ranking them. I'll have A to D tiers, and I'll be defining those tiers as I go along. Please enjoy. So first of all we have Jinji. Not my favourite tribe necessarily, but also heavily underrated. The fact that Jinji have mountains straight away means that they can get smithery, forges, and mines, which gives them a respectable middle game economy. I would say they aren't very bad at all. I quite like them, and I like playing against them or against them. But they really are underwhelming if you're going to be trying to compete competitively or something like that, because of their low resource spawn rate. I mean, some tribes like Imperius, for example, you're guaranteed 2 fruit in every spawn, but you look at someone like Jinji, and you're not guaranteed anything. You could get absolutely no resource in your spawn whatsoever. So they are effectively, almost subjectively, less strong than Imperius, despite their early on exploring abilities. I mean, their mountain spawn does protect them a little, but climbing isn't really that much of an obstacle. I think Jinji aren't very strong in particular, so I'm going to start by putting them in the C tier, which is maybe not tribe. But if you disagree, then of course you can comment and tell me why you disagree, and I'll be happy to respond to that. So the next tribe which we have is Imperius. Imperius I compared to Jinji several times when I was ranking them, but I'm not going to spend very long on Imperius because they have the default spawn rate for all resources, blah blah blah, so they really have nothing remarkable about them. Their starting tech is useful, organisation, although hunting would have been just as useful as starting tech for Imperius. And really, they are your standard economy tribe. I would rate them below Zabasi actually, because a farm obviously occupies less space than the fruit, but they do get going in the middle game quicker than Zabasi, because obviously harvesting 2 fruit costs 4 stars, whereas Zabasi, the farm costs 5. They're not as good as some of the other economy tribes in the end game, but they are useful early on. Let's choose Bardo. Oh, and where do I put my Imperius? Okay, I'm gonna put them in the B tier, because they're not quite overpowered, which would be the A tier, but they're not bad at all. They're a very viable choice. Okay. So next up we've got Barda. I'm not gonna spend too long on these guys because you know how powerful they can be. But I think Barda are better than Imperius for the simple reason that after they've hunted the animals, there's still the forest left behind. And the forest can then either be chopped down to stars, or they can have lumber huts built on them, which gives them an extra level of flexibility. Generally, Barda are just a very useful economy tribe. And as you can see, their resource spawn rate is also very good. So I would say that these guys are S tier, and I don't think anyone would really be able to disagree with me here. But if you could justifiably put them in the A tier on Steam Edition because of their reduced spawn rate for forests and animals. But I think they're just a level above Imperius and Zabasi and so on and so forth. So there you go. They'll go in the A tier. One more thing you want to note about Bardo is how, because of their expanding economy, they can get a giant very early on. In fact, as early as I got mine on turn 7, but you can get it even earlier if you are lucky with your ruins. So Bardo are very useful. They can't get a giant as quickly as Luxador, but for that they have a stronger end game, so that they're really on par with the very top tribes. There we go. Next up we've got Imagi. I wanted to spend a little bit of time on these ones. These guys are very, very interesting. The simple reason that they get riding to start with allows them to expand quicker, but their failing is the fact that gives them higher tech costs. In this case, I go to a ruin immediately and get the useless roads tech, which is not helping me early on at all. So effectively they're just an objectively worse version of Yadak with less resource spawn rate. Again, like Jinji, they don't have any kind of confirmed resources, like they don't have any guaranteed resources in their spawn, which makes them quite unreliable, I find. Obviously they can be viable, it really just depends on how fast you manage to develop, how many opponents you've got, and so on. Some people would say that if you're less experienced in the game, they might be annoying if they try and rider spam you with Umaji, but the rider spam really isn't very scary because until they've researched organization, they don't have any housing capacity, so they can hardly spam many units to start with anyway. Generally, I'd say the best tribe for early on expansionism would be Yadak, Luxador, and I mean I wouldn't even say Vengia are very good at it. By turn 5, Vengia will have lost all their advantage, so in the end Luxador is and Yadak are the best attackers early on. And Yadak actually have an economy, so they're more flexible than these guys. Let's research. I mean, it's perfectly possible to get a good position with Umaji and do well, but you have to be very careful, and you have to put in so much more effort than some of the other tribes. I've been knocking on these guys quite a lot, but I'm not putting them in the D tier, am I? No, I don't think they're completely useless. Let's just have them in the C tier. Okay, what about Kiku? Well, I already know where these guys are going, but let's test it anyway. The thing about Kiku is how unrivaled their economy is. Once they've got ports, they can effectively produce 3 population out of every water tile, which is insane, because they can harvest the fish and then they can build a port underneath. Very quickly, Kiku will have level 5 cities and overrun everyone with giant battleships. Not just that either, but Kiku are very useful on land as well as in their home turf when they're on the water. I do have a very bad sore throat today, so I might not be talking quite as much as usual. Okay, as you can see from my example game here, Kiku can occasionally suffer in very crowded games, as you'd expect from an economy tribe. But I would probably be overrun if this were multiplayer, but I managed to get a level 5 city and a giant, so this is just showing you the power of Kiku when they have their economy, and then you combine that with their naval strength in less crowded games, and they become an S tier tribe. Well, I don't have an S tier, so let's put them in A tier. And of course, get shields, and now what else? Yes, one more thing I would note about Kiku is how they're very, very flexible. Like, they can be powerful on land, but they're just an excellent tribe all round. I don't think there's much more to be said, really. And as you can see from this, the fact that they have such a big economy allows them to hunt giants, which means that they can take out other tribes very quickly, and eventually just end up taking over if your opponents don't deal with you early on. Now which tribe do we have next? We have Hudrik. I personally quite like Hudrik, and in fact I know a lot of people do, and they're my favourite tribe in the game despite the fact that they're almost one of the less powerful ones. So I know I'll be biased towards them, but I don't really mind. Look at their spawn rate. Their resource spawn rate is excellent. Even better than Barda's for animals and forests, and of course, they have the ability to build archers straight away. Their economy is slower than Barda's, but for that, as a compromise, they have archers that can disrupt the economies of other tribes early on, and they're generally very fun to play as. Maybe not your first competitive choice, so I'm going to put them in the B tier for now, but they're certainly viable and an interesting tribe to play as too. Because of the fact that they can have archers right from the start of the game allows them to be really disruptive to tribes, especially with weaker units like Umaji's riders. In this game, obviously, this isn't me showing off all my Hudrick skills. In fact, I'm kind of ill right now, and I can't, and my brain is not working. So this is probably rubbish gameplay, but it gives you an idea of what Hudrick do and what they're like if you don't already know. For my tribe rankings, I'm probably going to put them in B tier because they're very viable in terms of their late game economy. Early on, they can defend themselves if they build a warrior and an archer. They're generally pretty flexible, they have a nice economy as I said, and they have nice aesthetics, although I'm not really judging them on that. So there you go. That's my judgment on the Hudrick. I don't think there's anything more to be said, so we'll move straight on to the next tribe while this gameplay is still playing, and that is going to be the interesting Luxador. Luxador are a guaranteed S tier because of their flexibility, and this game clip which is coming up is one of the best Luxador games I've ever had, so I would have actually liked to play that one to its end, but I only recorded a little bit for the video. And obviously because of time constraints and so on, and YouTube upload constraints and so on, I couldn't put all of the game in, but it was an interesting game nonetheless. Luxador really excel at kind of small, semi-cramped maps like this, where they can get their economy out early on, and then just start overrunning people. They're amazing at that kind of thing. We'll research organization here already on turn 1, plus having 3 units, which is almost objectively better than some other tribes who will start off with a less useful tech, like, I mean, Yadags have a pretty good tech, roads, but it's not the best tech early on. So I'm putting these guys in A tier, of course, because I don't have an S tier. Oh, this is confusing me now, because everyone making game tier lists always has an S tier. Now I'm confused because I only decided to do A to D. Never mind, so Hudrick should be in B tier, Luxador should be in A tier. As you can see, their giants early on are pretty lethal. You can research riding as well, if it's not a very cramped match, and you generally have the flexibility to just choose what you want, so if I decided that early on I wanted to grow my city as fast as possible to get a defensive giant, then I could do that by just getting organisation and hunting and forestry. But if I didn't want to do that, and I wanted to go for a different strat where I expanded quickly, I could get riding, and my economy wouldn't suffer. So they're generally the most flexible and useful tribe in the game, I think. They're vying with Hudrick and with Kiku and Bardo for the top spot altogether. I mean, I didn't order them within their tiers in particular, but I think Luxador might probably surpass Bardo on Moonrise Edition, because Bardo's economy is just slightly weaker on Moonrise Edition, and obviously on mobile, Bardo is still insanely strong. Oh, hang on, this is the other way round, and Bardo got their nerf on mobile only. It might be the other way around. I can't actually remember. Basically, one of the editions Bardo got a big nerf and the other one they didn't. So Bardo are pretty powerful on PC, I think. Yeah, something like that. But anyway, on the topic of Luxador, they're just generally one of the most powerful and economic tribes in the game, and as you can see, their early economic bonuses lets them get bonuses right through into the end game if they use it wisely. I'd say they probably also have the highest skill cap. Oh, Vengir. Vengir are going to be interesting. Vengir are not my favourite tribe, in fact they're one of my less favourite tribes, purely because of the fact that Vengir's economy is absolute trash, and the fact that you essentially are forced to build a second guy on turn 0, which kind of forces you to go into one specific playstyle. So they are good at what they do, I suppose, which is expansionism. The only problem now is, look, I've got 2 swordsmen, I've got nothing in my capital, which means now if they move into my capital, I'll have no way to defend it. I mean, it was sheer luck that I managed to defend my capital as it is, let alone the fact that I only have level 1 cities. I think they're just a worse version of Lux. Like, I think Vengear lose their might. They lose their early game strength after about turn 4, and that's just a bit too early to lose your bonuses. Whereas Luxador can probably hold on to their early game bonuses right through into the middle game and end game. Now, as you can see, look, I'm capturing cities, yes, but I'm just building swordsmen every turn. I'm not actually upgrading them in any way or researching tech. So where do I place Vingir? I think I placed them in the B tier. No, the D tier. Hang on. Yeah, the D tier. The D tier. The D tier is about right for Vengir. They just can't do anything on a non-crowded map. So on your average domination game, they can't even get 3 stars because unless your opponent starts right next to them, they'll have all wiped each other out by the time Vengir have got a large enough economy. Let's move on to Zabasi. Zabasi is sort of like your tribe that everyone plays, but no one really thinks is amazing, so that makes them pretty balanced. Of course, they're a turn 0 economy tribe and they have a good late game, blah blah blah. Seeing that orange border in a multiplayer game is just like, another Zabasi. Not to complain though, they are very good at what they do, which is building farms and expanding, especially in the late game. But to be honest, I find them a little more dry and uninteresting compared to Barda and Hoodrick. Not to say their aesthetic isn't nice, which it is. Purely because of the fact that Barda can get forestry and just start chopping down trees or potentially building lumber huts to get early on giants. Much more dynamic, flexible playstyle. I put these guys in the A tier, just because the S tier is reserved for the overpowered tribes only. But other than that, I think there's very little to be said about them, so the one thing that does tend to annoy me about Zabasi, even though I play them myself regularly, is the fact that they can't neatly upgrade their cities. They have to wait an extra turn, for example. Like when you want to upgrade your city using farming from level 2 to level 3, you need to get 2 farms, whereas Imperius need to get 3 fruit, which costs 4 stars less. So they really are a late game only, I'd say. Take the whale, and then build another port, and Zabasi can get a super unit. Now Zabasi do get excellent super units, but they usually only get them around about this time, which is turn 10, and turn 10 is... I mean, Luxador could already have one by now, and they'd be overrunning the other tribes, so I think these guys are very well-rounded, honestly. It's very debatable as to whether they're better or worse than Imperius. I'd probably lean towards them slightly above Imperius, because Imperius have to research all different techs, like forestry is useless to Zabasi, so they don't bother researching it, but Imperius pretty much have to get hunting and forestry. If they want to do well in the late game anyway. So Zabasi can survive with very little tech simply by just using the one tech that they start with, farming. Now we're on to Quetzali, and Quetzali are really quite an interesting tribe. But they're very often overshadowed by their economic superior tribes. But I find them very interesting for the fact that their homeland is very fertile, giving them a lot of resources. They can't harvest them immediately, but because they're a defensive tribe, they don't need to harvest them immediately. They've got no one to compete with. No one wants to attack Quetzali in the early game. I used to play these guys in my main tribe, and I still have a soft spot for Quetzali. They're very interesting. Full hunt, and okay, whatever. We'll just recover our defender. I've never, in all the multiplayer games I've played, I've not seen a single person play Quetzali. So they're not a very popular choice at all. Whereas I've seen loads of Luxadors, loads of Zabasis, loads of Imperiuses, a bunch of Hoodricks, a bunch of Bardas, 1 or 2 Kikus, but very, very, very few Quetzali is 1 IMO maybe, and almost no Yadak either. Like, that bottom row of human tribes, IMO, Quetzali, and Yadak are really underrated. They're just so forgotten. I'm gonna put Quetzali for now in my C tier because they're not so useful that you really want to play them as a main tribe. We got IMO, an interesting tribe. They start off with meditation, which gives them a defense bonus in mountains. Well, that's not very useful, because as you can see from the spawn, sometimes they can spawn with absolutely no mountains, so it doesn't help them particularly. But if you do make no attacks for 5 turns, which you're unlikely to while you're developing your economy, you can get philosophy, reduce your attack cost by 20%, and of course, you can get your excellent Altar of Peace to level up your cities. I would say IMO are one of the slowest economy tribes in the game, but for that they are an economy tribe and they do deserve recognition. As I said, the whole bottom row of human tribes like Quetzali, IMO, Yadak, they're completely underrated. Yadak used to get some attention because it's one of the most recently released tribes, but now they're just all no one really plays them, but I think they all have their potential uses and they're all very interesting. IMO can build big chains of mindbenders, and in single player they're devastating. I have a video on it. And in multiplayer, well, I've dealt with IMO in multiplayer before, and they can be very dangerous if they manage to mindbend your units. If you overextend yourself early on. Okay, what now? Yadak. As I said, the last row of human human tribes, they're completely underrated. And Yadak is not an exception in particular. They have an excellent resource spawn rates. Their land does look like a desert, but for that it's actually pretty fertile, the plains. They get a balanced mix of different resource types, but I tend to find fruit being the most common, and of course, although you can get attacked early on like by Luxtor or someone, as you're seeing here, it doesn't really hinder them because they can just road in troops quickly and defend themselves, and Luxtor are no threat. I can just level up my cities and we're done with them. I'm gonna put Yadak in an honorary A tier, but IMO are gonna have to drop down in an honorary B tier. Sorry, IMO are gonna have to drop down to the C tier because I don't think they're that useful. But Yadak's starting deck is really interesting, so I think they're very well balanced as a tribe. Okay, so as you can see, Kiku have attacked my capital. If I was using my brain, as I mentioned, blah blah blah, I'm ill, I would have kicked them out using a giant, but there you go. And I mean, I'm not really trying to commentate the game here, I'm just making some points about Yadak as a tribe, but they're really strong at things like this, where you're trying to expand using large armies in the middle game, because they can road their troops in really quite fast, and at the same time they can develop their cities to such a level that they can build giants, which Umaji don't have the capability to do, which is why I always say that Yadak is really just a better Umaji. Next up we have Aquarion. Everyone's favourite fish tribe, and of course, they have a reputation for being completely useless, but I think that this reputation is undeserved. Now, I'm not going to go putting them in the same tier as Luxor or anything, because I think that they do have a certain amount of value. They're not the complete joke they should be, and all in all, they can be an interesting tribe to play. They just tend to get defeated too quickly early on to be very viable in multiplayer. I wouldn't play them except if it's for the memes, and so on. However, they have crabs as their CP unit, and everyone likes crabs, so I'm putting them in the A tier anyway. Right, don't try to argue with me. And what else? Oh yeah, spearing. Spearing is a very useful tech. You can get some tridentians early on, and if you do, then they're almost unstoppable because they can take out any units in 1 or 2 shots respectively. So if you get 2 of them early on, they can expand across water, land, and nothing can really stop you. Aquarion, I can understand that they are getting a rework, but at the same time, I think that they can be played. They just need a little bit of skill, a little bit of practice, some playtime, a lot of playtime actually, to master them properly. But after that, they are a very interesting and useful tribe. Quetzali sieging their own city over there. Well, that kind of makes sense. I mean, if I was doing a serious tier this year, I'd probably put them in the D tier with Vengear. They're not amazing. Their resource spawn is complete rubbish. Okay, so we've got Illyrion, aka the Cool Music Tribe. I came up with that. Now, let's see what happens. Hopefully Yadak is stupid and give me their capital. Because that's pretty much what Illyrion do, right? Take people's capitals. Let's move here. Ooh, village. Okay, and the ruin as well. Hello, Yadak. Now what? Let's talk about Illyrion. Illyrion are a really interesting tribe, and they're a really aggressive tribe early on. But they do have a good economy, and that makes them a very balanced tribe. I think they're an interesting one that are very playable. And I've seen them a lot in multiplayer, but really, I don't know if they're the best. Because the fact that they don't hunt animals means their economy is just that much weaker, makes it that much difficult to get their already slow-moving super units. I'm gonna put them for now in the C tier. I know they can be brilliant. You Illyrion mains, just leave me alone about this, alright? They are a good tribe. They are a very solid tribe. They just aren't my favourite, and to be honest, I don't think there's a justifiable reason why you could play Aquarion as your main Illyrion as your main tribe. They're just not strong enough to justify being played the entire time. They can get some Navalons which are really good, but in the end their economy is weak and they're slow to get going. That's the problem, which doesn't really couple well with a tribe that has polytools, and their main building is supposed to be the sanctuary. But look, what is the sanctuary doing? It's just far too weak. It produces 1 star. I don't really pretend to know very much about Illyrion, since I only started playing them on Moonrise Edition. But from what I've seen so far, they don't seem to be amazing or anything. Some people swear by them, and that's fine. And in addition to that, you also don't have the choice to chop down trees, which is really annoying. Let's see, put them in C tier. Let's choose Polaris now. And I don't know what to think about these guys either. They're an interesting special tribe, and I really like playing as them. But again, they're like Aquarion, they're strong in the late game, but they're vulnerable early on, and their vulnerabilities just make them a little bit too weak. I think right now they're a mid-tier tribe, so I'll put them in the I'll put them in the B tier. You know, those Garmies, those Knights, they're actually really quite useful, and I think that they deserve some recognition for that. As you can see, you need to freeze a lot of water early on to really do anything with Polaris, because otherwise your polar warfare is completely useless. But once you do, you should have a decent, respectable economy going. Obviously, they'd be, like most tribes, they'd be 10 times better if they started off with fishing or something like that, but they can't always be boring tribes. You gotta add some interest to your game, and I respect that. What's more, I've got a village just by expanding along the sea line. So, overall, I think that... Is that a word? Yes, it is. Alright, just leave me alone, okay? Overall, this is an interesting tier list subject, and I think that you can form opinions on this all day, but this is just a basic tier list you can use to go off if you're going to be entering any tournament or anything anytime soon. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video. Until then, goodbye.